All right, welcome to a quick introductory video for our class on Shiver. All right, so I'm going to cover a few things briefly. How to read manga, just some briefly, how to look at some things if you've never looked at manga before. Quick bio on the author, some history of the short manga story, and then, of course, a little look at one of his most famous characters, Tomei. All right, so a few things here just on reading manga. Just remember that anime is the animated TV show, like a cartoon, and manga is the printed version. When it comes to manga, so you'll want to actually read from right to left, not the normal what you're used to left to right. So you would start the right. If you're looking at your book here, you read, like I said, from right to left. So we're starting with this particular panel on the top here. We go from this top panel down to the next one, over, and then down. And that would be how you would read, in this case, the second page. All right. Manga typically refers to Japanese graphic stories. Sometimes they're a series, sometimes they're standalone, sometimes they're short stories. It has spread to all sorts of other countries. We've got different types of manga that have really exploded in Korea right now, and China, and all sorts of other places. Manga in America, we have different, Dark Horse Comics and a few others making their own manga. So, yeah. Styles can definitely vary. You usually see black and white. Part of that is just it's the cost of making it and printing it, things like that. But one of the stereotypes of manga is these gigantic eyes. And yes, sometimes you do see that, but don't expect to see eyeballs that take up 60, 70, 80% of the face in all manga. And you'll see that there's a lot of different styles in manga. It's not always the same type of style. This particular picture I have here, this is from a series. It's quite popular. It's about the sport of ping pong. And as you can see, while there aren't a whole lot of words in this particular page that I selected for you, the style is very different than the picture, the one above. Now, if you're going to be buying manga for your classroom, I do want to give you just a real quick warning. A lot of manga, if you look on the very bottom, so if you look at the very bottom of this particular picture here, you'll see a rating, teen or above is what they recommend for this. There's a lot of manga that's probably not what you'd want to put in your classroom. There's a lot of manga with sex, with nudity, with all sorts of inappropriateness in them. Even some of Junji Ito's works will sometimes have a little bit of nudity, but not the book that we're reading. So definitely not only pay attention to the age limit, but flip through a book if you're going to buy manga for your classroom. All right, so we're going to look at the author, and this is going to be pretty short. I'm just going to cover some basics because there's some optional readings on the website about the author, and I don't want to make you listen to something and then read the exact same thing again. That's just kind of an annoyance for me when that happens. So, but I will tell you a few things like prior to becoming an artist here, he worked as a dental technician. And for a long time, actually, he was doing both. So he had his day job working in a dentist office, and then in his free time, he was drawing manga, including some of his famous award-winning manga. And he was really juggling both of these for quite a while until it just became too much for him. He was winning awards. He was making a lot of money. Well, he was making money. And so he eventually gave up being the dental technician. He's been creating horror manga since the 1980s. And he can actually attribute his career to one of his sisters, or actually two of his sisters, who were big fans of horror manga at the time. So he started reading it. He lived in a really creepy house, which, if you read his bios, To get to the bathroom, you had to go like underground and through a earthen tunnel kind of a situation full of bugs and very, creepy, nightmarish kind of a situation. So he's, I want to say about 58 at the time of this video, 57, 58. So he's getting close to 60. He has won multiple awards, both inside of Japan and outside of Japan, including an Eisner. If you're familiar with graphic novels, you know Eisner is a really big award. He didn't even know about this award. He didn't know what it was or anything like that. Hadn't really even heard of it until he was told that he had won the award. And the story that he won the award for was the Frankenstein one he did. He did a graphic novel, a graphic short story version of Frankenstein in a book very similar to this one. And the Frankenstein story is really good. If you like these works, feel free to pick that up. For the most part, it follows the story of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein really well, at least until the ending. Then he puts a little bit of his own twist in there a few times, but quite good. He is often described as a very nice guy, very quiet, not the kind of personality that maybe your students would expect him to have, given this macabre background that he has. All right, so quick information on some of the graphic short stories in Japan. If you really want to know a lot more, I would highly recommend that you read A Drifting Life, Tatsumi's memoir, biography, autobiography, whatever you want to call it. Just it's phenomenal, and it really does a great job of not just giving you an idea of what life was like post World War II, post World War II in Japan, but it really does a great job of explaining kind of the history of manga, the short story manga. But anyhow, so after World War II, eventually there's going to be a boom in all sorts of different things, but especially in manga. I'm not going to focus too much on the stuff before World War II because you've got your picture scrolls and you've got different paintings, different things like that. And some people argue those are manga, and that's where manga starts. And you can argue that those types of things can be short story manga, but I'm going to go just a little more simple in my explanation. So we have these 4-panel manga that are popping up all over the place. They're very popular. They're in these magazines. And in fact, they're so popular that the magazines are constantly running contests to get just everyday people to create and send in. And then the winners get various prizes, some money, the equivalent of a few bucks, which was quite a bit at that time. And then as we get some currency changes and all that good stuff, the prices go up. But anyhow, 4-panel manga, it's very similar to what you'd see in the newspaper here, like a comic strip. They're not really in-depth stories. You don't really have character development. You don't have much of an arc. You don't have any of those types of things. It's usually cute or funny kind of a thing. Maybe a lesson is being taught. Simple. Think Garfield, Peanuts, whatever might be in your Sunday paper. Then, because of the popularity, we start to see this big boom. People are starting to collect these different 4-panel comics and slightly longer comics and putting them together into books, and you get these kind of rental library clubs. If you're old enough to remember Blockbuster, think of it kind of like that. Only instead of checking out a video, renting a video, you basically rent a book, a manga book. These were quite popular because then for the equivalent of a few pennies, you get your entire book. You get to read it, and then you return it, and a few pennies more, you get another book. And for people who didn't have a lot of money, this is huge, and it really does help this boom. But the boom is a bubble, which eventually does pop, and that's going to lead to some issues. Early on in the short story manga, there's going to be, whether it's real censorship or perceived censorship, especially right after World War II. So there are going to be some stories that don't get published or don't get published for a long time. In fact, Barefoot Gen, which is an awesome graphic novel, Actually 10 in the series. It's not a short story. He had some trouble getting it published at first because of fear of censorship from the Americans who were in charge, occupying Japan after World War II. So there's some censorship, but then that pretty much goes out the window. And now, like I said, you want to be very careful when you buy manga. So the longer short stories develop, and you'll see that a lot in Tatsumi's autobiography. One of the things that he and a group of his friends really want to do is take what they see in movies, this character development, this plot that's really focused on story, these big arching characters and plot developments and twists and all these different things. They want to take all that and put it into manga. And we start to get these longer short stories that are also emulating this idea. And there's a lot of great ones out there. Red Snow was pretty good. If you want to look at any of Tatsumi's short stories, I have loved just about everything I've ever read. Then you get into some other things like Kitaro, who's I like it. It's this kid who's kind of half yokai, half human, and he goes around and he kind of helps people out, and he more or less has a sidekick called Ratman who I'd love. So that's more of kind of a kid's, but it's got a real gothic nature to it as well. So it's essentially like a collection of comic books. Think of that like that. Same characters, different adventures, or Scooby-Doo put down into, manga form, something like that. Then there's some others. The Boxman, which I just read a couple years ago, a little more abstract in its storytelling, very different than others. Not as big a fan of that or Trash Market or A Single Match, but they're also collections of short stories that you could look into. So my point is there's a wealth of things out there that have been translated into English that you can find. All right, so some spoilers here. So feel free to stop because Tome is in our book here in Shiver. In fact, you'll see that her image is the biggest one on the cover, even though her story isn't that long in the book. In fact, if you analyze the cover, it's really interesting because you'll see all the ropes heading to people. Hers is the only empty one hanging there. Possibly because Tommy can't be killed. So she was his first story. She's got a special place in his heart. He wins an award with her right out of the bat. First story, wins an award. So, she's definitely an important character. That was back in 1987. He's been using the Tome character since 1987. There have been at least 9 movies. You can find a lot of them on YouTube if you really want to watch. In Japan, live action movies. There's also been TV series, manga series, anime series, all about Tome. We've got some, you can find merchandise. I got a backpack here. We got gifts that people have made. We've got some manga, some anime. We got a collected work here. You can buy the Tome movie collection. So there's all sorts of stuff out there. People have tattoo stickers. She really is a rather important person in the manga and anime world. In fact, Quibi just recently cast an actress to play her in their live-action TV show version that they're producing, which I was really excited until I saw that Quibi is a subscription, and I've got enough subscriptions as it is. So the basic premise is you have this beautiful young lady with the birthmark right below her eye. Through one feat or another, someone falls in love with her usually, and then that love turns to obsession, sometimes very, very, very quickly, and the obsession ends in the person trying to kill her. In the story we're going to read, she does not come out very nice, but she pretty much always gets killed, but then comes back to life. In fact, the pieces of her can each sprout into a different Tome, and then In some of the stories with her, there'll be like an entire city just filled with her because she keeps getting killed constantly, keeps getting chopped up, keeps getting whatever, and then the pieces sprout into newer versions. So that's the basic premise. Sometimes she comes off as pure victim, and sometimes she comes off as a victim who you might be like, well, she wasn't a very nice person, but she's still a victim. So, all right, so that's your quick introduction to our book. If you've never read Junji Ito, you are definitely in for a treat.